We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and a huge welcome to Abi Dunn, who's the founder of or co-founder of the Pineapple community. Abi, it's very lovely to have you. It's especially lovely to have you because you just told me the morning you've been through. Abi has been involved in a minor road traffic accident this morning.
Yes, I have. Well, thank you for having me, by the way, Matt. I am live from where I found myself on the floor under a line bike this morning in the city at rush hour because my business partner Charlotte said, "Let's go on a line bike." I've never done it before, and she said they're brilliant, really good. And within 10 meters, I was on the floor underneath it, having caught my trousers in the chain and couldn't move my leg. So. And the kind girl that helped me also took a picture of me. So I think she's just gone straight to, you'll never guess what this old bird's just done in the city. So yes, wearing a pair of ripped trousers.
Well, having safely been cut out of a line bike, I'm really grateful for you.
I was attached to it. Had to be cut out with a key. So yeah, it was really nice.
There's almost certainly no one who doesn't know who you are and what you're doing with the Pineapple community. But just in case there aren't, maybe we could start there. Very quick introduction to you, your story.
Yeah, sure. I founded a business called 68 People, which I now own with my business partner Charlotte, and I co-founded a business called Pinapple, which we'll come on to. I grew up in-house with a business called Revolution Vodka Bars at the time, Inventive Leisure, and looked after their recruitment and training, started as a GM. And in the context of this, they were a fairly advanced company, I'd say, in terms of people data. I felt as though I had a good grounding in it. Obviously, we didn't have access to data that we do now, but it was measured, and there was really clear patterns of when people metrics improved, customer metrics improved, and then financial metrics improved. So I grew up probably in quite a lucky place, and I was there for 15 years, so I saw that journey. And yeah, been on an interesting data journey because when I first set up 68 People, I remember writing a blog that said, you shouldn't measure anything. It should all just come from the heart. And anyway, quickly realized that if you don't measure something, it doesn't get done, and you can't have a starting point, and you can't grow anything. So flip reversed, and now, I'm involved quite heavily in a data business. So I've had an interesting journey with data, but yeah, so that's where I'm at.
And thank you. And for people who haven't come across Pineapple yet, you're looking at people data and benchmarking people data in the hospitality industry. Where as you said, what is it? I guess what's the problem you're trying to solve for people in that space?
So it was Philip that approached me about a year ago, just over a year ago, and he had him and Will Fraser, who works more in the sporting space. He's an ex-rugby player for Saracens, and they have loads of data around, they can correlate how many hours a team should play together to be in a certain division, I think, something like that. So the sporting world's got loads of data that they use. And so I think their brains met up and thought, oh, this feels like hospitality could really benefit from this kind of analysis. So we kind of all pulled together, and initially the shocking thing at first was the lack of transparency. I remember, doing a few panels and having conversations, even in my 68 People world, with people directors who wouldn't tell me their management turnover and wouldn't tell me their employee turnover. And not because they didn't measure it, they certainly measured it, but they didn't know whether it was good or bad or where they sat compared to other people. So they were keeping their cards quite close to their chest. So, and there was a feeling that there was a lot of gut feeling, and gut feeling, there's some great decisions made on gut feeling, right? But there's probably quite a lot of that in the hospitality space. And from talking to people, it felt as though people budget was a fight. And with a lack of evidence, it was an even harder fight, because you kind of go in and saying, I think this is what we should do. And it felt as though we wanted to help people have a bit less of a battle with that. And ultimately make it a better place to work, right? That's the ultimate purpose. But to help and serve people directors to do that, then that was why we wanted to do it in the first place.
And what have you seen when people don't have access to that data? Like, what are the problems that causes, or how does that actually show up?
I think it's about that gut feeling, point of they're going to try and make quite strategic decisions, but maybe without data. And I think, look, the layer of, I'm learning a lot about data in my own business and going through quite an interesting journey that we have a top line metric of something. So, for example, it might be employee turnover or 90-day turnover, but that's a good place to be, right? Working in a space that does something with data. But then I suppose the some people that you talk to are like, okay, now I've got that, I really want to understand what influences that and how do I measure. If I'm talking about 90-day turnover, what is the right 90-day turnover? We don't know that. We've created a benchmark. We don't know whether this should be, what it should be. But also what influences that, and at what point on a journey is that influenced. So that's definitely, I don't know whether that answered your question, but without that, you can see that when you start thinking like that, you kind of can see where we've come from, of gut feeling, and we'll do that, and only comparing ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah. I think my perspective is, from the consultancy work that I used to do, if you don't have good data within the people space, you're just arguing about an opinion.
Right.
And if you're the people director or a people person in that space, it's really about your personal advocacy. Like, have you managed to build the relationships? Do people consider you an expert? But it creates a lot of pressure on your own personal influencing style to be able to get stuff done. I think where people use data really well within businesses, it takes some of the tension out of the conversation. Does that make sense? Like, particularly as you say, if you're taking a more experimental approach, like we've got a number that, like 90-day turnover is a great example. Like, we've got a number, we want to move it. Like, what's the ideas for moving it? We can go and test those, and then no one's right or wrong. Does that make sense? You're not if you structure
it's not a battle of opinion. And in the people in, let's say operations space as well, we've done a lot of insights work in that field, and the people space tends to have more yellow energy in it, and the operations space tends to have more red. They will win a lot of conversations, and so to balance that out, like you say, by bringing those two teams together through data, not just who's the loudest.
And I think you talked about people using their gut to make decisions. I think one of my other interesting experiences is you work with really great operators, and they do have a really good instinct for doing the right thing, but my experience within people is often getting the people metrics right, whether you're measuring them or not, actually takes some time. And there is a degree of like obliquity to it. Does that make sense? Like, it's not like you do one thing and suddenly you get a really easy result from it. Sometimes you have to put like more like an organizational health perspective, like you have to do a number of things and get those right, and then that tips the balance of probability and you start seeing more of the outcomes you want.
And I think that's put people off data. They've had, it's actually been maybe damaging having some, for example, a blanket list of like-for-like sales versus employee turnover, and you can say, all right, well, there's no really clear pattern then, so we could, obviously people metrics will matter, and so it's been a barrier, to a certain extent.
But like you said, I think you referenced this in your Revs experience, like actually if you reduce your turnover, maybe it shows up in your sales in 6 weeks time, or 2 months time, or 3 months time, or 12 months time. Like, it's not, I think that's the thing that people struggle with in the people spaces. I think sometimes the effects of good stuff can take some time to show up.
And nobody has any time, right? And especially in hospitality, it is arguably the hardest environment to test and learn, unless you've got really good tech, I suppose.
And also, I think some of the things you do on like the sales and marketing or ops front to get a short-term number make your people metrics worse. You end up overworking people, or you end up, pushing people in a direction that for the long-term health of the business isn't right. And so I suspect some of your people measures are good counterbalances to like, that instinct to like get a short-term result at the expense of like the long-term health of the organization.
Yeah, and I think it's dependent as well on the, the purpose of the organization. Like if your purpose is revenue, then there are certain things that need to happen. If your purpose is to create a great place to work, then that's different. And it's my experience of this is very much of how those people at the top of the hierarchy are, even without the data, how they just feel about people. And their experience.
So what have you, so I mean, I've noticed, even like, how long have you had the report publicly available? It's like
so we've piloted it for what felt like years, but it was probably about 7 or 8 months. So we had a small pilot group with some great operators in it, and got some really good feedback. We went live with a Q1 report that had 70 subscribers. And we were really pleased with that. That is 70 operators thinking, we really give a shit about people and culture. So, that's great. And we're just collecting data now for Q2. We're constantly innovating, and we're listening to feedback all the time about, how can we reduce the time to complete the data? How can we, add different metrics to it? But I think is exciting is how the feedback is how people have used it. And, look, I don't know whether it's directly connected, but, for the first time ever, there was a people metric in a headline the other day, right? The Propel headline about Mission Mars, which is obviously Roy's business was Revolution. So he's always been passionate about people data. So I'm not for one second saying that this is linked to Pineapple, but the fact that it's in a headline about his employee turnover, that's a good thing, right? That's great.
Yeah, I think from the bits and pieces I see, like you're really starting to change the conversation, which in like, I don't know, 6 months since, or 3 months since you launched this is an incredible achievement.
Well, that'd be lovely. And in terms of some of the things that we've heard, I think people being able to take the report into boards and it adds credibility to their, their strategy. I think it, we know that in some instances we've got examples of where people have been able to add headcount because we've got one of the metrics is people team to total headcount, and they came in under the benchmark, so they had an argument to add headcount. Brilliant. We did some benchmarking around bonuses, and I know that so one of the subscribers has rewritten a bonus structure. So there's been some really tangible things that have happened, but also just more so generally the feeling of people directors maybe having more confidence that they were right, or that they can just have helping them have a better conversation. That's all I want to do.
And so let's get into the real practicality of it. Like when people are getting their Pineapple report, I would say the other benchmark data is available, but it's not. So it's a Pineapple report. Like, what do you think? What would your advice be to people? Like, what should they be doing with it?
I suppose that's where I'm a little bit nervous about giving opinion, because I'm not a people leader and I'm not an operator. I think the benchmark gives you a starting point, right? And that's the fact that people are interested in talking in a data fashion. That's great. But I don't know exactly what that benchmark means. I don't know exactly, well, we don't know exactly what great looks like. So, for example, on the 90-day journey, we don't know whether some businesses should lose 20% of their people before 12 weeks because that's just what that they are not right. They've not they're not got anything, whatever it might be. So we don't know a lot of the solutions, and we're not trying to give those. We're just I think in time, as we start to get more data and start to look at how it correlates with different things, that's what we're really excited about. But I don't really want to say that someone should go and do this. One thing, that I think it's a start point of data, and I think having more data around it is probably the next step of kind of isolating something that you think, right, that doesn't feel quite right. We are significantly over or under that benchmark. How can we then start to analyze what's affecting that? So, for example, with if we're talking about turnover, what part of the journey is affecting turnover, because it's so broad, right? But kind of chunking that down to say, well, we know actually our challenge is 6 to 9 months turnover, and what is it within that is turning people off? When do people not becoming, when are people becoming engaged and disengaged, and why? That's super interesting.
Yeah. I think for me, I think the benchmark data gives you a really helpful way of orientating yourself, with where you stand in the industry, that sort of thing. I think the interesting bit is when you try and work out which of those benchmarks matter to you. So attrition, for instance, we talked before coming on, I think it probably depends a little bit on your brand and your service model and all those sorts of things. Let's say, just for argument's sake, the benchmark for attrition we could tell me the actual number. Was it about 75% across the industry?
Don't ask me actual data figures.
Okay, all right. So
I need to look them up.
Okay, but let's say 75. I think if you are in fine dining with a high level service, actually you probably want to be quite significantly lower than the industry.
Yes.
Benchmark.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in QSR, if you've got a pretty structured service model, those sorts of things, your business will probably not suffer from a higher turnover than that.
And we've become obsessed with, I suppose, trying to, less and less so, but trying to keep people as long as we can. And actually that doesn't fit with our society anymore. So we don't know exactly what the right turnover amount would be, but also that's dependent on how great your new starter journey is, right? If you can get people to a break-even point in 2 weeks, then it's not huge. Maybe it's not a huge concern. I don't know.
One of the things we're trying to encourage people with on Youda is, one, to start asking new joiners how long they expect to stay or want to stay.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that you can so I
can hold it against them when they go.
No, but if you let's say you expect to stay 3 months and you stay 4 months, that for me is a different assessment of your employee experience than if you expected to stay for 9 months and you left after 4. Does that make, they're not the same thing?
Yeah.
So judging people relative to the expectation of the individual, I think, is an interesting perspective on it. And then the other piece of work we're looking at is essentially who can you afford to hire? So like you say, if you understand your speed to effectiveness and how that is driven by what you know about the new joiner. So let's say, let's keep it simple. You know that if someone's worked in hospitality before, you can get them effective within 2 weeks. If they haven't, it takes 4. And you know your payback period on time. And then you can work out, actually, who can I afford to give a summer job to, essentially.
Yes. And then you've got to start blowing your brains, though, about what effective is. What do we class?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's my current preoccupation, trying to work that out. But yeah, we're trying to do that by mapping against sales and number of hours on the rota. But I think what for me, the bit I'm keen to try and is, one, I think you need to understand your data relative to the context in which you're operating and your strategy. And I think it's one of the things I've seen people misuse benchmark data is when they sort of just go to average. Does that make sense? If you're 10 points above a benchmark, you have the comfort that you're doing a great job. If you're 10 points
you
below,
walk away from it and go, well, that's fine, and that you would never push yourself to go.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, maybe if you're if being 20 points above really shows up in terms of your experience and that sort of thing, then sticking to your strengths, I think, can be important for people. And the other bit, as we were talking about, is what are the inputs or the levers you can use to get the results you want? For 90-day turnover, like you say, what is it that actually drives that number?
Yes, because you could be doing, like we said, 25 things, and only one of them might be the lever that affects it.
Yeah, I think I think that's a really good point, Abby. If you can be using data to be working in a more effective but less busy way, I think that's what people like.
That's the slogan there, right? That's
if
everybody wants some time back.
Everyone needs every people person I speak to in hospitality is working insanely hard at the moment, just trying to keep up and under constant pressure to we must get better at this, we must get better at this, must get better at this. And I think if you are looking to improve, the better you use data, the more focused I think you can be about where you spend your time and effort.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I'm just really excited to be involved in this kind of conversation. If speaking personally, I'm learning all the time about data. I'm not like a shock data analyst or anything like that, but I'm so excited by it, and I can see how it can support people, and it feels like the right kind of thing to be talking about, and because there's so much great stuff going on in the sector that it'd just be so nice to be able to support that in a way that goes, yeah, look, that's incredible.
If you don't mind, I mean, like maybe your sort of personal journey over the last, I don't know, couple of years in terms of your use of data. Like, it would be interesting to hear a bit more about that, because I think there are lots of people who get into the people space in hospitality who don't come from like a data background. So either you move out of operations, or so people who've been to university who end up in people tend to have done arts degrees rather than science degrees. It's just a different background of people. And you're right that they're like, I don't think there is this sort of, I don't do data, I don't do spreadsheets.
I know.
Like what's your experience?
I think I've always been interested in it because it's like black and white, right? And it's if you can prove something, and you can I always used to be obsessed at school with like chemistry, because it was.
I can totally imagine you with a little pair of safety specs on, like
yeah. I was a nerd. But yeah, I think, like I said, when I set up 68 People, I'd come from a corporate business where there were so many metrics. I was like, fuck the metrics, we're not going to measure anything. Like, I was so anti them because I'd seen the behaviors that had come out as a result of what we measured, and they were they were trying to push all levers, and that created some crazy behavior. And I started to become conscious of, if you push that metric, that kicks out that kind of behavior. I didn't like that kind of behavior, so I went rebel and didn't measure anything, and then kind of started obviously realizing that that's, if you don't have a start point of something, you can't improve it. And if you don't, and that sounds like really simple, like data people are going to be watching this thinking, fucking hell, that's simple, Susan. But like, we didn't have if you don't have a starting point, we can't improve it. And, people, the team, and certainly at 68 wanted to know that it was me, in my view, saying, let's not measure everything. They desperately wanted measures. So that's the kind of, I suppose, a little bit of insight. And now, I mean, along with Charlotte's help, we measure a lot, and I'm like, I'm shocked that I'm involved in something that is around data, but it's so bloody interesting. And I can't add two things up on an Excel spreadsheet. So, I can't do formula or anything like that. But I'm really interested in seeing data in like a pretty way, like in a graph or a pattern of something, or with colours. Not on a spreadsheet.
I think
love a pie chart.
Love a pie chart. I think your point there about how much teams appreciate data is really important there as well.
Goodness.
Like, I've seen in organizations like insecure senior managers hoarding data, as a way of like maintaining their sense of control over the organization, and actually getting that data into the hands of people who can use it and who can have it influence their decision is so important.
Yeah, and looking back, in my in-house career, that was always the case. We used to create some beautiful leadership courses, and actually, when you'd put, we struggled to get them at capacity, and you'd put out a finance course and talk to people about going through a P&L, and they were like, "Oh yes, please." And I was just crikey, but they just wanted access to information, and to be able to, make good decisions and understand why decisions were being made. So yeah, definitely people are, have certainly always been more into data than I presumed. Pigeonholed in the, pigeonholed, can't you, into not being a data person? But
you can. Yeah. I think there's a lot of I don't know what the right word is, like self pigeonholing. That's not. I don't know what, like people like they take a decision not to engage in it in a way that I think is a bit of a barrier to overcome for people.
Yeah, because it can be scary, and you can kind of, we've definitely, I think we definitely, people don't want to know sometimes as well. Like, is there a fear about knowing a benchmark in a certain way as well? Because if you get a benchmark and you're significantly over whatever the metric might be, other companies, then that's, you don't want to take that to your boss, right?
Well, yeah, I hope we can change that though, because
yeah.
I get this, like, with people not wanting to find stuff out from their employees. Like, like I've had lots of conversations with people like, oh, that's a really great idea for a set of questions we could ask employees, but I don't want to do it now because I don't actually want to know the answer.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
and I haven't got time to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you've got an issue, like, wouldn't you rather know about it now than in 6 months when it's an even bigger issue? And you've got, like, so I think that I do think there's a habitual thing. Like, the more data you generate, the less anchored and important one data point becomes, and you can like get this sense of, okay, I think it's maybe seeing data in the people space, particularly for this. It's an organizational health type of data rather than a score on, like, on like in a sport. It's not like, it's not the goal, if that makes sense. It's like you're trying to,
and it's got to be kind of coupled with other things. Like I say, we're taking feedback all the time about the report and what metrics are really valuable to people and maybe what aren't quite so valuable, or what and what other things would be really valuable to supplement those that are about kind of current issues in the industry, about what's happening, HR issues coming down the line. So there's things that we all the time are thinking, actually, that data point is really good, but it also needs to be coupled with some kind of sentiment or some commentary about what actually people are feeling and thinking, or some other data points about people want to know, just more. You could go into craziness, couldn't you? You could have hundreds of things, but trying to find the ones that actually matter is interesting.
Cool. Well, look, just before we wrap up, can I press you for like 3 top tips? What should people be doing around people data?
What should people, I suppose, just having conversations that maybe start with data is, and kind of hypothesizing. I like this word that I've learned, and I keep dropping it in everywhere, and it's just basically coming up with an idea. But if you're hypothesizing, it sounds so much better. And
in fairness, I think the thing about a hypothesis is you are trying to generate the data that reduces the uncertainty of that hypothesis.
Exactly.
I think we have lots of ideas in the people space.
Yeah.
Like, no one's short of ideas for how you can improve. No one goes to the effort of testing whether they work or not. And so you either do something that works, then you didn't know it, and so when the budget goes, you just cut it. Or even worse, you spend 2 years doing something that doesn't have any benefit to your people or the business.
Yeah.
So
I don't think as an industry, and including myself, don't reflect very much either. Look, this isn't about giving operators shit, but I think you've said to me before that in comparison to other sectors, we don't do a lot of like testing small groups and see what happens in a different way to them. We put everybody through the same thing, and if it works, we do more of it, but if we don't look at why. And look, obviously that's a time thing. It is such a unique industry that, about what's happened, what it actually is, and that it's so busy and crazy. But I really liked your point about testing and learning and just slowing down slightly. And
slow down to go faster. That's what the little one is. Abi, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If people are interested in Pinapple, want to find out more, want to sign up, where should they go?
They should go to the website, which is This.Is.Pineapple.uk. And watch out for, we've got some really, like I say, we're innovating all the time and got some really exciting things happening. So I really appreciate you allowing me to come on and waffle a little bit about data from a non-data person.
Abi, thank you so much. Really appreciate you making it, notwithstanding your small accident this morning. Thanks to everyone who's joined us, and see you again next week. Cheers.
See ya. Bye-bye.